What's up guys, it's Kristen here today with the New York Times By the Book tag. I don't know what took me so long to get around to doing this tag, especially because it was created by one of my favorite people here on BookTube, Berg. I just absolutely love her, and I was tagged by a few of my friends, Joce from Squibblesreads, Vivian from Lamp Sunnies, and Ryan for ForTheLoveOfRyan. And these are some really interesting questions, so let's just jump right into them. The first one is, what book is on your nightstand right now? And I actually have a huge stack of books on my nightstand because at the beginning of every month, I always stack up all of the books that I plan on reading for that month, and I love to watch it slowly dwindle down. It's like a visual of my reading progress for the month, or lack thereof, and so whatever books I talked about in my TBR for this month, I will just link you to those. Question number 2 is, what was the last truly great book that you read? And of course my immediate thought is The Secret History by Donna Tartt, because I read that back in November-ish last year and I declared it my new favorite book of all time. It was just that amazing. But more recently it would have to be The Vegetarian by Han Kang. I mean, come on, it was just amazing. The next question is, if you could meet any writer, dead or alive, who would it be? And what would you want to know? And if you had asked me this question about a year or so ago, I would have said J.D. Salinger. I mean, of course, like millions of other people, I love his writing, but he was also such an enigma and a mysterious figure. He never talked to reporters or did interviews very often, so I've always wondered about him. But then I saw the Salinger documentary, which was an amazing documentary. I highly recommend it. But it makes you see how he had a lot of problems in his life and he might not have been the nicest person on earth, so I thought maybe things like that are just better left alone. But that being said, would I ever give up an opportunity to meet George R. R. Martin and ask him when Winds of Winter is going to come out? It's been almost 4 years since I read Dance with Dragons. I don't know how much longer I'm gonna make it. Not that I'm rushing him though, it would just be really nice to have some kind of an estimate date in mind. So I would also love for him to explain the whole history of Westeros to me with, you know, the Children of the Forest and the beginnings of the dragons and building the wall. It's such a vast history that I can't quite comprehend reading it. Question number 4 is, what books might we be surprised to find on your shelf? And honestly, I don't think there's anything too surprising. If you watch my channel, you know I do read a very wide variety of genres. I don't really shut myself off to any, though I think I'm kind of a weirdo in keeping some of my cookbooks on my shelf instead of like a normal person in the kitchen. I don't know why I do that. Then question number 5 is, how do you organize your personal library? I'm sure, as you can see behind me, it is mostly organized by color, but not always. Obviously, you can see Game of Thrones is right over there, and that whole series is together, but other ones, I separate my series. It's kind of just a big old mess. Question number 6 is, what book have you always meant to read and haven't gotten around to yet? Anything you feel embarrassed never to have read. And I know I try not to feel embarrassed like most people. There's no way you can possibly read every book that you want to, but I know I keep answering this same thing for every one of these type of tag questions, but I genuinely do feel horrible that I haven't read the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and so I just need to read it so that I can stop using it as this answer for questions. Next up was, what was a disappointing, overrated, just not good? What book did you feel like you were supposed to like but didn't? And do you remember the last book you put down without finishing? And for this one, oh, I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of hate, but I did not love Lolita by Nabokov, and it was more of a disappointment to me because I went into it thinking it was going to be one of my new favorite books of all time, people who I have very similar tastes to and whose opinions I really value, absolutely love it, and I don't know what exactly didn't grab me with it. It wasn't necessarily the disturbing content, which of course is a little bit of it, but honestly I was just bored reading it and I couldn't even force myself to try to finish it. Maybe I was just in a weird frame of mind at the time, I'm not really sure. I might give it another try try sometime in the future. But the last book that I DNF'd without feeling guilty at all about it was The Nest by Cynthia Dupree Sweeney. I thought it was like one of the worst written books I had ever read, and I felt no guilt about DNFing that at 20 pages. Question number 8 is, what kind of stories are you drawn to, and any that you steer clear of? And for this one, again, you know, I read a ton of genres and I don't necessarily close myself off from any, and especially looking at nonfiction versus fiction, of course, they are two totally different beasts and I look for totally different things in them, but I would say with fiction overall, I really am drawn to beautiful writing, and I don't mean necessarily like flowery, over-the-top descriptive. It could be very blunt and stark. I mean writing that has a lot of depth to it and a lot of layers where you can tell that the author thought out every single word and it was not wasted, which is probably why literary fiction tends to be my favorite genre, though it doesn't mean I won't read books that aren't beautiful. And with nonfiction, I'm more drawn to very unique stories that most people don't know about, or that I at least haven't heard about. Question number 9 is, if you could require the president, or prime minister in my case, to read one book, what would it be? And as a political science student, of course, I'm going to say a political book, and I would recommend one that I actually just read this year, Lawrence in Arabia by Scott Anderson. It is all about the Middle East in World War I and the role that the European powers played. If you look back in the history and you need to find one point in time when things really changed, it was World War I, 1916 in particular, literally 100 years ago, when the British and the French in particular signed agreements where they essentially stole land from these Middle Eastern countries, and they stirred up conflict on purpose so that the proxy wars would benefit their cause against Germany. And it's just not something that's widely talked about or discussed in history classes, at least in Western countries, and obviously it should be, but I assume that we just don't want to be reminded of the part that our governments played in the current day problems of the Middle East. And the last question is, what do you plan to read next? And at the moment I am literally in the middle of all of the books that I plan to read this month. I don't know what is wrong with me that I can never seem to read one or even two books at once. I have to read them all. So that is it for all of the questions for this tag, and I will link anybody I tag below. I haven't thought of it at the moment, and I would love to hear what some of your answers for these questions would be. Leave them in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!